Yes.
I mean, cancer within the stomach quite a bit. It happened in my 42 years. They took all
That's fair.
and so I took years. Cancer chemo regime that I did beforehand. Got 4 rounds of that. That's it.
That's
So we get together we can talk more about the golf course out there. Sure. There's not much left for sale out there, but no. We're scratch up some more if we can. Good to see you, though. Good night much. Welcome back. Thank you. Dana, Cookie. Yeah, we met at that event. Yeah, you were both years ago.
Yeah, I'm gonna be boom again.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Wife just voted. We just had our little annual corporate meeting. It's just boom.
I'm there.
You and Dawn, good to meet Peggy.
All right. I got my son working for me now. I think.
Yeah. It's been a darn good one. Yeah, really, I remember.
How are you? Good to see you again. Amanda. Thanks for all the new meetings.
Just new health plan.
It's like I'm that old guy that lost stuff.
Oh, I did.
Let's keep it easy. Dumb. Goodness, then the kids are
Yeah, I think that's 2 minutes. I have a question for you.
You got it. Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody was stolen. I don't remember. Oh, don't let her know. Where are you? Have it at home. He sees a. Yeah. Oh.
Just so you see what's okay. Yeah, right.
You're out of order. No. Yeah. I'm down possible, isn't it? For years,
Between Marcus and I never had to do that. I got to maintain my weight.
Yeah.
I was just telling those guys. I was 184 when I got back. Then yeah. You don't want me to lose weight, so.
I can't.
Hey, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This time I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Approval of the minutes. Motion.
Approve. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions? Approved. At this time, we'd take any public comments. If there's anybody from the public that would like to make any comments, now's the time. Hearing none, we'll move on to the consent items. Are there any questions or discussions on these 2 items?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor will say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries.
Move that.
Dean?
Dean, thank you. I'm sorry I missed you.
All right. I'm so skinny now. Can't see me.
That's fine.
Draft fiscal year 2027 unified work plan. Gunner?
Thank you. It's that time of year where we're putting together a work program for the next fiscal year. We've talked about this the last few times. Today, we're going to walk a little bit more in depth of how that program is broken down. We are going to be asking for a vote today. This is to approve a draft version of this document. And then we'll bring it back to you for approval prior to the final due date of June 1st. This is pretty hard to read from your stands here, but what you see before you is the strategic framework that this committee worked for a long time to develop. We've basically broken down all the MPOs work into 4 buckets. On the far left, you've got strength in MPO governance and operations. That's real core basic administration stuff. Regional planning and federal excellence is your next category over. This is our core planning work, the required documents that we have at the federal level, et cetera. And the third column is kind of the enhanced partnerships and services rings. These are the things that we do for our member jurisdictions, kind of nice value adds for our members. On the final column on the right is what we call purpose-driven innovation, or what Dylan likes to call wildly important ideas. This organization has made a priority of carving out some time to pursue big ideas. We've had some of those come through here with big success. We have more coming down the pipe. With that in mind, we'll talk about each of these in a little bit more depth. Governance and operations, this looks the same as you've seen it from last year. It's pretty basic stuff. Grant administration, office administration, making sure we're updating our work program, our financial operations, committee support, work we do to put on these meetings for you, organizational development. And then one thing that is new this year, and Dylan can speak to this more in depth later in the agenda, is putting aside some time to work on a 2080 agreement review along with our bylaws. That's a continuation of the strategy work we have done. It also ties into some of the funding work we've done. Here again, we are down to our second column, our regional planning excellence, one of our basic core planning functions that we do here. I'm not going to read each of these here for you, but I am going to call out the one that is new on the screen, and that is the Brenton Slough Transportation Plan. This is an example of our members coming to us and say, can you take this on for us, facilitate a planning effort that is multi-jurisdictional, semi-regional in nature. So I just want to point out that there. There we go. Partnerships and services. There's a lot of ongoing work that we do. I'm not going to count out each of these here, but for example, a bike ped, county program, grant assistance, media relations, things of that nature. The last thing I'll point out is in this final column of purpose-driven innovation, we do have a couple of things that are new. And that's the Grimes line abandonment that our friends at the Register so kindly wrote about recently. And that is a developing situation, as you all know. We're following that as close as we can and trying to influence that process to the best of our abilities. The other thing is the Vision Zero program. You're going to hear more about that as part of the funding update in a little bit. But that is a new piece that we're rolling out here, and that is really the implementation with the tools that the MPO has direct control over in its toolbox of the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan and our Vision Zero goal. I'm going to pause there. Do you have any questions on what's in the work program? Next, we're going to pass it up to speech budget. Anything? Okay.
In terms of budget, there's on this screen here, the full budget was included in a link in the packet, but what you see here is the quick and dirty breakdown of expenditures and revenues. For expenditures, we're a pretty light organization. Our costs are primarily staff, so salaries, wages, benefits, and so forth, as well as we show ineligible and eligible indirect costs, so phone, computers, lease, that sort of thing. And then we have direct costs. So the direct costs are the consultants that we pay for different work products that we do, any equipment that we purchase that might be specific to one activity and that sort of thing. So that comes out to what my eyes are about 5.7 million there. I will note that in both of these charts, the money we just got awarded for the Safe Streets for All, the second round of Safe Streets for All is included in here. So they show up in both the other direct costs because there'll be consultant costs associated with that, but they also show up in the DOT funds that you see in that second chart. So in terms of revenue, you can see the different sources of revenue there. DOT funds make up a large percentage, almost 80% of our funding. And then we have the assessments from the community, so it's $1 per capita that you see there. And then there's different, there's a few others in there, and some of these are, so Altoona and Bondurant's study.
Look at this helping out.
I know. They received SDBG in there. They received some SDBG funds to do that interstate planning environmental linkages study. That's what PEL means. And so this is the local match for that study. So that'll flow through the MPO. It's not MPO dollars. It's just coming in and then going right back out. The Brenton Slough, that Gunnar mentioned a little bit earlier too. That's another one where the communities are paying the MPO. We will manage that project. So they're paying us, we turn around and pay that out. Safe Streets for All local match from our community. So some of those projects from that grant are directly serving those communities. They're paying the match. So that's the revenue from that. You can see there at the bottom, the big takeaway surplus over deficit. We've got a $213,000 surplus as it sits right now. And again, this is draft, so things could change. We have some preliminary figures on the DOT funds. Those could change a little bit. Usually when they change a little bit for the higher. If you go to the next slide, I'll break down other direct costs a little bit more. Like I said, there's a lot of consultant fees and so forth in there. So you can see what those are. At the top, and I won't go through every single one of them, but the top, that's our legal, our audit, that sort of thing that goes in there. We do some sponsorships of a few regional organizations, programs. We purchase data. That's one of the big ones. So streetlight data we've spoken about before. We make that available to all of our communities. That's an example of a direct cost that we include there. Some of the consulting costs that we mentioned, so the studies, for instance, the Altoona Bondurant Pell study, Future 435, that analysis, all of those are found in that other direct cost. Typically, it's not this high. We just happen to have a lot of studies, some of that outside funding from the DOT for the Safe Streets for All. That's making a couple $1 million higher than it typically is. And I have one final slide on budget. This is a little bit of a forecast going out. So you can see, like I said, this year we're showing it's a little higher than typical. Once those special studies drop off and things go to normal, you can see it drops back down and then heads out. In a couple of years, we'll see that our costs start to exceed our revenues. However, that green blob at the bottom, that's showing our reserve. So we do have adequate reserves right now, and there's a line going through that green. That's showing our policy on how much reserves to keep. We want to keep at least 3 months of operating reserves. So we are very much well above that. And as time goes on, as if we keep seeing our costs exceed that, we'll need into those reserves. But it'll take us another, several years before we hit any trouble points with that. And this is something we keep monitoring. I've shown this over the last several years. It always looks the same. We do a pretty good job with budgeting. We don't ever typically spend everything we budget. But we want to be conservative, and that's what this looks like right now.
And away will still be here in 2035.
We have run the draft budget through our finance subcommittee, and they were supportive of it. So the next step with all of this is we'll send it to the DOT as a draft. They'll review it, give us comments back. We'll bring it back to you in May for final approval, so they can be in the DOT by June 1st. So we do have a couple months left to continue to tweak and update as new information comes to light. There could be some things that we're looking at as staff that could use some of that $213,000. Not that we're going on a spending spree, but there's a few things out there that we're looking into. But that's how it looks right now. So if there's any questions, happy to take those. Otherwise, that's what we have.
Questions for Dylan or Gunner? It's a voting item.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor will say aye.
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 Abstentions? That is approved. Audit. Dylan?
Yeah, quick update on this. Our policy calls for doing an RFP for audit services every 5 years. It's been 5 years, so we need to go through this. A couple of weeks ago, staff put out an RFP to 10 or so different auditing companies or firms. We're asking, there's a schedule in there. They have to have comments or questions back to us by the end of this week, respond to them. Responses are fully due by April 3rd. So by the time this group meets next month in April, we hope to have a recommendation for you. We'll work with our finance committee to review those responses. We need to do interviews with anybody. They'll be the ones to kind of help lead that. And like I said, we'll come back next month with a recommendation of firm to go through. I'll point out we've been using Denman for the last several years. We had a contract with them. That contract has also expired, and they did give us a heads up that their costs would increase pretty significantly. So even if we weren't required to go through an RFP, it was probably a good time to go through that anyway. We'll keep you updated on what we hear and have something for you next month.
Office lease?
Yes. Another administrative thing to make you aware of. Our office lease currently goes for another couple of years, goes to the end of November of 2028. However, there was a one-time window in there that says if we give 6 months notice before November of this year, in other words, if we give notice by the end of May, we can get out of our lease early and we can get out by this November. Knowing that, we have looked over the last couple of months with the assistance of R&R Realty at other sites and opportunities for office. R&R gave us a handful of, or more than a handful, gave us a lot of sites that we looked at on paper. We went and toured 6 or so other sites around. And then we narrowed that down to 3 sites, including this office. So this office plus 2 other places to do an RFP to get more formal responses back for costs and so forth. So what we received back, our current landlord is Knapp Properties. They gave us 2 options, and I'll talk about those here in a moment. We also looked at 800 Walnut. This is a former Sky View. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but the former Wells Fargo building. Cost came back a little bit higher than what we would have probably not anticipated. We knew it was going to be high, but enough to where we said that's probably not for us to look into. And the third option we really liked, but they had a tenant change and took the space that we were looking at, and so that was off the table. I will also note that Amanda and I had a couple of conversations about Dart Central Station being a potential option. However, we think that probably staying here would probably be best for us at this point. So with that, I'll look at the couple options presented by Knapp, and I apologize if that's a little small. But basically, they gave us an option to extend it by 3 years or 5 years, and that would be on the end of that 2028 end lease date. So there on the bottom left, you can see what our current lease looks like. We're currently paying $14.95 through the end of this year. Then it'll go up to $15.25 per square foot, and that's all in. So there's no additional cost on top of that. You can see what they're proposing for options, what I'm calling options A and B for those extensions. So option A essentially continues that same pace. It just extends it out further. Option B actually goes backwards a little bit in terms of the cost for a year or so and then continues off. With both of those options, they are proposing in option A 1 month of free rent, and the option B is 2 months free rent, as well as tenant improvements. And the tenant improvements are higher for the longer term lease than the shorter term lease. We did talk with the executive committee about this last week, and I think our staff's recommendation, I think executive committee was supportive of it, is to go with option B, to lock it in for a longer period of time, get the higher tenant improvement. I will note on that tenant improvement, that is just what they came back with. I know R&R on our behalf kind of pushed back and said, can we make that a little higher? So next week, Knapp is going to come in here and walk the space with us and see what improvements we might want, and it could end up being something higher than that. But for right now, that's what we have for you.
Dylan, can you talk about what those kind of improvements?
Yeah, so the tenant improvements that we're asking for, when we re-upped our lease back in 2020, so it's been 5 years or so, they redid all the floors in the common areas. So we'd be asking for updates to the floors in the offices. So that's one thing. There are some improvements to the building itself, and I don't know if this would come out of the tenant improvements within our space. But for the building itself, one of the things that came up during our certification review last year was ADA accessibility. And if you look at our office itself, we have ADA accessible into the office and into the restrooms, but there's no ADA push button accessibility into the building. So on the skywalk or the front door. So that's something we've asked them to do. It's kind of resisted that, but when we put up the RFP, then they suddenly said, yeah, we can do that. So that'd be an improvement that we really want to see happen. Technology improvements in this room would probably be the other big thing to just make this space. It's pretty good, but we know we can make it better and make it a little, so you can actually read it on the screen right now, that sort of thing. And they've indicated that it's probably something they can help us out with. And there's a few other little things here and there, but those are the big ones. So like I said, right now we just want to get feedback. Does this seem, are you comfortable with moving forward with this? Obviously, if we get to a point where there's a lease in the next month or so, we would bring that for you. You have to approve that. But for us to continue down this path, we want to make sure we're checking in and that everyone's comfortable with the direction we're heading here.
Well, I direction you on. Just curious if they might make any improvements to the park.
To the garage itself, I don't know. That's a city garage.
Is it correct?
Oh, no.
And Dylan, there was an out on this one too, if we go
Yeah,
down.
if we do the longer term one, I'd have to check on the shorter term one, but the long one for sure also has that same after 5 years there be an out clause, just like we have now.
Dylan, are you looking for a motion or just a sense that feeling okay?
Yeah, just a consensus right now. This isn't on here for a vote, but just want to make sure that everyone's comfortable and I feel like we've done our due diligence. If there's anything else you want us to look into, that sort of thing. We don't want to come with you with the lease saying we've got to do this by next week to hit that window, and you're going, wait, we've never heard about this before. Did you think of this or that? So that's why we're bringing it to you now.
Location's good, space is great. I'm in favor of seeing where you're at.
I will say staff likes the space. One thing I didn't mention that it's up there on the screen is parking. We have, for staff, there's underground parking. We have access to that. There's no additional costs for our lease for that. We do have also a little bit of a parking allotment for you all, for guests and things like that too. So it's very good in terms of parking and access and everything else. We feel, and you can tell us otherwise, but we feel it works pretty well.
I think what's the best option. I trust you guys to make a decision of where you get to work.
I feel like Connie put Rob down here on purpose since I make fun of Des Moines all the time. You know, a little bit like, what's Des Moines doing here? Flexing their muscles. So
We want to put somebody around you, Dean, to keep you in line.
Connie's a smart one. You gotta watch her.
Right,
Bellary Cider, you know?
that's right. Moving on, the Transportation Improvement Program Development, Gunner.
And in for Addison, who leads this for us. And we are at the early stages of developing 27 to 30 transportation improvement development program. This is a very important program for us. It's a kind of a wonky acronym, but really what it is we set goals in our long range transportation plan, and then we work to implement those goals by programming federal dollars in the next 4 years. This is the vehicle by which we program those federal dollars to hit those goals. So we are at the start of developing that document for you all, and making sure that you all can spend the federal dollars you've been awarded. What you need to know are two things. One, we're going to send out status reports, more for your technical staff than you individually, but we're going to be sending out those reports and wanting to collect the information. One very important note is that if you have projects that are programmed in the current federal fiscal year, and you're at all worried that you're not going to get that project let by September, we need to know that in the next couple of months, because what we're going to need to do if that is the case is we're going to want to move those dollars to a different federal fiscal year. So just be aware, if you have projects you're not sure you're going to get let during this federal fiscal year, you're talking to us. So schedule before you and what you can expect from us in the coming months. Again, this is more direct to your technical staff. We've had the conversations with them. We'll be peppering them with emails and phone calls to make sure that we have the information we need to keep those federal dollars flowing for you. Any questions?
Thank you. Funding review update. Dylan?
Thank you. Walk through where we're at with the funding review. I know last month we took a chunk of time and made sure we brought you up to speed of what's going on. So we did that also with the technical committee earlier this month at their March meeting. And then we just had a meeting again with the funding review committee. So we want to update you of what we heard there and kind of what the steps are going forward. So what we heard last time, again, we walked through kind of these 4 different elements, and each element had 4 different options. This is what we heard from both the funding review committee as well as the policy committee and the technical committee. I won't go through these in great detail right now. I think we touch on them here in a little bit. But really to recap the high level of this, in terms of schedule, so Gunnar just talked about the TIP as the vehicle by which we program all this. That's the point that we're trying to work around. We have to have all of our funding allocated or awarded, go through that process before that July deadline. So what we want to do is start almost a year in advance. So we typically start in December with applications. We want to move that up to July. The point of that is to make sure that all of those awards are made in time for when you are putting together your the CIPs. and your budgets, that you know what kind of projects you're gonna have and what federal funding's coming in from the MPO. So that's the big reason. Then that gives us more window of time to develop the tip that Gunnar just spoke to. We talked about having a low minimum for safety. So the first element that you saw there was the safety score. How much do we want to emphasize safety in the scoring process? And the group said, let's have a lower minimum, but then we have other ways we do safety too. So we'll have a little more information on that. In terms of creating a funding pot of dollars, first of all, having a Vision Zero program where we do roadway safety audits as well as countermeasures. We landed on a number for that. And then we created a set aside amount for safety as well. And we'll talk a little bit. That's one thing that has changed a little bit from the meeting just a minute ago. And then the funding swap is something we looked at too. So I think we go through these a little bit more one by one. So in terms of the schedule, again, this is what I just spoke about. We'll move that up to July is where we're looking at now. Again, the funding comes in 4 years. So in this next round, we'll be awarding 2 years of funding. So that's not going to be the norm. That's just to catch up. So I want to point that out. Safety scoring. So right now, if you go to the next slide, I think, right now we have 23 points for safety in our current scoring process. We've worked with some of the technical folks as well as just reviewed with the funding review committee to increase that to 48 points. So increasing the number of points that are available for safety and then saying you need to have, maybe it was 48 points, 44 points, somewhere in there. 44 points, Marcus is telling me. And then we're saying you have to have at least 25% of those to be eligible. So you'd have to have 11 points. I can do math. 11 points for now of safety to be eligible for funding.
To apply.
Yeah, to apply. And the way that we have the scoring tool set up, or the application tool, it will tell you in real time as you're plugging in your project how many points you're getting, and it'll tell you you're not there yet. You keep trying. So the group thought that was a pretty good arrangement there. And it also sends a good message that if you're not doing kind of the minimum safety, you're not going to get funding from the MPO. One thing we're going to do is run through some past projects to make sure that makes sense and that we're not handicapping a project that there's no way they can meet those. But we feel pretty confident that will work. The Vision Zero program, this is just saying that we will commit to funding basically roadway safety audits and countermeasures on corridors that have critical and high safety issues. So this is what we showed you last time too, that didn't really change.
Let me speak to this?
Yeah, if you want to.
Sure, yeah. So we got the SS4A grant that initiated a program where we'll be doing roadway safety audits 1 year, followed by low-cost safety countermeasures the following year. They gave us money for the audits. They didn't give us any money for the safety countermeasures. So the conversation we've been having is, one, how do you want to pay for those safety countermeasures? Is that local dollars, MPO dollars, what's the balance? And two, do you want to continue with the audits beyond the 4 years that's the grant is going to give us? And the answer that we got was, let's do both. Let's do both at 80% MPO. And that's why we're at the leader level for this variable as we've been putting together these scenarios. So what this slide is showing is a projection of what that program would cost. We're using some pretty broad assumptions to understand what one roadway safety audit would cost, and we're using some pretty broad assumptions on what safety countermeasures are going to cost next year. Corridors range in size from 0.9 to 1.4. So there's a significant variation in what the spending is. But for the sake of forecasting dollars, we're thinking that this category is going to cost about $2.2 million on an annual basis. And we want to sustain this at a pace for 20 years to hit the Vision Zero goal by 2045. Anything you want to add there? Okay.
I'll take this one too. Roll right into it.
We'll take this one. I thought I updated these slides. And guys, our funding review subcommittee said we like it, but we like it just want to change it a little bit. And I tried to change it between 250 and between 350 and 4. And I messed up my slides. I apologize. Where we landed is when we were, excuse me.
Now I'm confused.
What's that?
Perfect.
Perfect? You like it? Okay.
No, I'm confused. That's perfect.
Very confused, and I apologize for that, Dean, but I'm gonna make this clear for you. We went into the room with them this afternoon and said, we weren't sure if we were at committed or if we were at pillar. Committed said, let's do a 15% safety target. And what we're saying safety target is money coming out of MPO federal dollars every single year dedicated to a new category of spending. We went into the room and said, we kind of heard 15, we kind of heard 25. What do you think of 20? And after the conversation, we left that room with, let's stick with 15. That's a really good starting point. And also, every single project that we're funding out of other categories is going to have safety elements. Otherwise, it's not going to be eligible. So that's kind of how we landed on 15% as a category of set aside for a safety target for our funding every year. So where that lands us is on this committed column right here in the middle. What you're seeing is that we took a safety category of 0 and moved it up to 15%. That comes out to about $2.8 million on an annual basis. The two categories that will be decreased to offset that are system capacity and reconstruction. No, I think we left it there. This is a little bit confusing, but I apologize. I really know better than to try to switch up slides right before the show. But what we're trying to show here is that the program that we've committed to funding costs about $2.2 million per year. And the annual carve-out that we've talked about in terms of setting our funding targets is about $2.8 million. So that is going to give us a surplus, about $600,000 for other programming and other efforts related to Vision Zero or infrastructure we so choose. I apologize that the slides that got stirred up a little bit. I was trying to give you the most up-to-date information based on the conversation previous.
The final element of this is a funding swap. And again, this would be a way to take federal dollars, make them local dollars, and do a swap with either probably a member community so that the money is a little more flexible, especially for low-cost safety countermeasures where they're relatively low dollar amount. They might not make sense to put through the federal aid process.
I like between community, like I got local laws, federal, he's got federal, and he needs local.
Exactly. Yep. And I think I don't know what else you have for slides on this one. I think to go back on that federal swap process, we have spoken with a couple communities or a couple MPOs that do this already or are working towards it. So Dallas is the one that's been doing it for the longest time. We've had a couple conversations with them. Columbus, Ohio is also kind of in a similar spot to us. They're putting this together. They have hired the firm PFM to do this for them. They have sent us the scope for that. And that's really where we want to go with this. We thought that was a pretty good idea. Let's hire some professionals to come in here, make sure they're going to understand better than us the financial aspects of that and what funding can be swapped and what can't be swapped, all the rules and how all that would be packaged together. So we're going to learn from Columbus. We've already got their scope. I know what they paid for that. Earlier in the budget, I didn't call it out. One of the elements in that direct cost was $30,000 for a consultant to do that, to do what Columbus did. I will also point out that we also learned after last month's meeting, Luis Montoya was here from DART. He came from the San Francisco region. He said, oh, we did that in San Francisco all the time. So we had conversations with their MPO and learned a little bit more about their program. So everyone does it a little bit different, but I don't think it's as uncommon as maybe we thought it was. And we're learning that as we go along. So what we're saying here is we're not going to jump fully into it and start doing this all the time everywhere, but we'll do a pilot program, understand how it works, understand what the potential is. And then if we learn from that, we like it, we can always go forward from there. So I think that, yeah.
Gunnar, who's the they you met with this afternoon?
Funding review subcommittee and Mayor Jones, Councilman Murray, Supervisor McCoy, Scott Sanders, we're all on that. And then if they want to jump in with any additional comments about the process we've been through, or
Very thorough.
Yeah, jump in here. Jump in. Yeah.
Do you understand all the slides? Matt, do you understand all the slides that they just showed us?
I do, as a matter of fact, but only because Gunnar went very slow.
Oh, okay. Or then that's why they were here. Okay. Okay. Well,
But it was,
There's a lot of heads nodding yes, so I guess then.
Well, thank you for doing it for us. Mike, thanks. To wrap up this agenda item, if you go to the next slide, we want to make sure that this seems like a good direction. Again, the funding review committee thought so, but we want to make sure that this group also thinks so. Our next steps with this, if everyone's on board, is we'll start building things out a little bit more, start working on application and scoring and all of those things that need to go along with it. And as we continue to explore a couple other wrinkles iron out, but does seem like a pretty decent approach.
Yes.
Complete process.
I hope so. I think we're getting towards the end. Like I said, our goal is to start the process in July as far as applications. So we've got a few months left, and that'll be here before we know it. So we really want to get this wrapped up so that we can make sure we're educating, especially the tech committee, all the changes, applications put together. Marcus can finish the online scoring tool that he's worked really hard on, and make sure it's really buttoned up so we can hit the ground running in time for that July window.
We will be hearing about this again in the coming months. We have 2 deliverables that are going to take all the work of the subcommittee and translate it into policy. The first of these is going to be the funding guidelines book. That's going to talk about all the different programs, et cetera. The other piece is going to be an amendment to the long range transportation plan. The primary thing that we're changing are those funding targets. The long range transportation plan is one of our primary documents. It's required that we do we do a public comment period on that. So after our meeting in April, we'll kick off a 30-day comment period for that. We'll be asking for approval of those amendments and the documents in May. That sets us up to be hopefully ready by July 1. An aggressive timeline, but still okay.
questions, comments? Right, we'll move on to 2080 agreement update and bylaws.
Thank you. Gunnar alluded to this earlier in talking about the work program, but something we have on our radar to working on, we've already started a little bit to really get into it in earnest, is a review of our 2080 and bylaws. They were both last updated in 2018, so it's been a little while. Since that time, we've seen changes in population, we've seen changes in the planning area, we've had some organizational evolution over the last couple of years. This is also something that came up during our certification last year, and the USDOT recommended that we take a look at that and make sure that it's cleaned up in terms of, again, population numbers that have changed. They, in their read through it, they were a little confused on which committee does what. So there's just some things we want to clean up, and it's a good time to catch up with some of the governance work that we've done over the last few years. You go to the next slide. A couple areas that we want to really target on our population. There's population is referenced numerous times throughout those documents in terms of, how many representatives each community gets is based on population and so forth, but it doesn't really say what population figures to use. We want to make sure that's pretty nailed down, because if push ever comes to shove, we need to have something verifiable that we can point back to in that document. Like I said, some clarification on certain procedures. For example, I know the way the executive committee is structured and the way that's appointed is kind of it's confusing, admittedly. So we want to make sure things like that are cleaned up. And then there's some things in there that are just antiquated, that just need to be changed or taken out, updated, whatever you want to say. So those are the types of things. I've already started working with Scott a little bit on this. There's probably some stuff related to the funding that we just spoke about too that will have to be in there. So, for example, if we do that funding swap program, that's probably something we want documented in the 20E to say this is something that the MPO can do. That might come later, might come now. I don't know when we'll do that, but that's an example of something we'll want to explore as well. So right now, again, just want to make sure everyone's comfortable with moving forward on that. If there are things you were aware of or something that's troubled you with the way our bylaws 20D works, let us know so we can make sure that we're addressing that. If, everyone's comfortable with the way this organization operates. And we'll bring this back to you over the next couple of months. We'll probably take it in little chunks and we'll address the population thing, get that squared away, come back with something else, get that squared away. Knowing that this all has to go through your boards as well, all your councils or boards of supervisors to get approved when it comes to 2080.
So with the changes to the population updates, will that have any impact on assessment changes, frequency of assessment?
I don't believe so, and that's one of the things that I'd like to clean up. I think when you were treasurer for the MPO, we changed to doing assessments based off the census estimate. That's not very well spelled out in the bylaws or the 20D. It says the most recent census information, but it doesn't say that decennial census, special census, census estimate. So that's the type of thing that I'd like to clean up, but I don't foresee changing our actual how we do stuff. I just want to solidify and confirm that that's how we can do it.
Questions, comments? Go ahead and move on to the legislative update and DC priority list. Gunner?
I'll start us off with this one. I know you all are watching these things as well. One of the things this office has been watching closely is the bill that would rearrange who all is appointed to the board of SUDAS. SUDAS is a guide that our counties and cities use to build the streets and roads. And there's concern about watering down who's on that board and changing what those standards are. Ultimate implications are we going to lower standards in such a way that shifts costs to taxpayers as opposed to the upfront development? There's a planning bill that passed out of House that would eliminate the smart planning principles. They're not enforceable, it just states that these are good guidelines. Marcus may have more on this, but he's been up at the Capitol quite a few times the last several months, speaking to the different lawmakers. It was at a subcommittee today on the Senate side. That's where that stands today. We hope it doesn't pass. Next up is the bike safety bill. We heard a lot of this when it hit. We heard a lot of feedback from our bike advocate people, and we've had discussions about this more broadly at our active transportation roundtable. Hasn't gone too far at this point. This referred to the public safety committee. That's as far as it's gone at this point. We continue to monitor it. Lastly, I'll mention the property tax bills. I'm sure you are watching this more closely than we are, but just want to acknowledge that we're paying attention to that. I'll pause if there's anything you want to talk about on the state side.
The SUDAS board, they had it pretty watered down. I mean, I think exactly said they were going to back that off a little bit. How did that end up?
I can't say for sure. Have you heard?
There haven't been any changes since the House passed it, but they added 2 additional engineers from the Society of Engineers, basically. So
They were a bunch of developers or anything like that.
there's a bunch of developers on it, yeah, but the idea was to have 2 additional engineers do it, call it good from there. So
Then they had 3 total, but now each 18 members and even numbers now.
something like that, yeah.
So I think it's also, it used to be that developers had a 1 vote edge. I think it's essentially it would be 50-50.
Okay.
Next up is the annual DC list. We put together this list every year. This list is put in front of our congressional delegation. We visit them as part of a DC trip. The MPO is again working with the Greater Moines Partnership to be on a policy team to speak to transportation priorities. And so something we do each year is collect information from all member governments about federal active asks for transportation projects. So we've been working with your technical folks. So mostly this is for them, and for your situation awareness. But we want to make sure that if you have an asking for federal dollars, we know about it, have it on our handouts, can speak to it with our delegation. We're asking for those materials again by the end of this month.
One other thing on the DC trip, I mentioned this to the exec committee last week too, but when we're in DC, if you want MPO staff involved in any of those meetings, would you have it on transportation projects to show that the MPO is supportive in answering those questions? Please feel free to invite us, and we'll do our best to make as many of those as we can, in addition to our own meetings that we do. That way we show a more coordinated, unified front there.
Questions, comments?
You have one. I want to discuss the federal side of things, where we're at with reauthorization. I mentioned this is something that's being discussed right now. The current transportation bill expires at the end of September of this year. So I want to walk through something that was introduced last month. It's called the Basics Bill. On the previous slide, it said what Basics stood for: bridges and safety infrastructure for community success. And AMPO, the Association of MPOs, put together a presentation. So I pulled some slides out of this that I thought would be better than me trying to come up with my own slides. So I borrowed those and I'll walk through these real quick. First of all, this bill, the basics bill, it was introduced by a member of the House, but it was really developed by what's called the LOT Coalition. So that's AMPO, National Association of Regional Councils. These are two groups that we as the MPO are a member of, but it also includes the National League of Cities, Conference of Mayors, counties, and so forth. So really it's the local communities and the different organizations that are representing them. So it's very focused on the benefits to local communities in these when it comes to transportation reauthorization. This is, I won't read through all of this, but it kind of gives you some of the timeline and things. This is what they're calling a marker bill. So it's really just putting out there, this isn't going to be the bill that's passed, but hopefully Congress will take elements from it. Potentially they'll take all the elements from it. Most likely they'll take certain things from it, but it really outlines what these different groups want to see in the bill as it's continued to be developed. So I'll walk through a few things. One of the big points that these groups are making is that local communities really, there's a disproportionate share of what they receive in revenue compared to what they control in terms of transportation. So they own, local governments own 43% of all federal aid highways, 75% of all road miles, yet they only get 16% of the transportation funding that's out there. So they see that as a pretty big discrepancy and would like to, shift it to be a little more equal. The other thing that they're pointing out is in the infrastructure bill that we have now, the IIJA or bipartisan infrastructure law, whatever you call it. If you look there on the right, we went from about $5 billion in discretionary dollars in the previous bill to $28 billion this time. And communities and local jurisdictions are eligible for about 24% of the overall funding. So that 24%, they're going to round up to 25%. If those discretionary dollars go away, if they say we're going to change all those back to formula, they want to maintain that 25% wedge in the pie. Because if it all goes back to formula and that all goes back to DOT dollars, they're going to lose out. Local communities are going to lose out on a significant amount of money that we've seen over the last several years. So that's really the basis for what you'll see in their proposal going forward. And I won't go through all of these here on the next couple slides, but this just explains what I just mentioned. So there's several things that you'll see in this bill, and I'll walk through these. I'll point out a couple of things in particular. So planning funds, PL funds, this is that, when I walked through the budget earlier, this is the DOT dollars that we receive to run the organization. Right now it's 2.5% of a certain percentage of the transportation bill. They want to make it 2.5% of the whole transportation bill. They also want to take away, remove all local match requirements, and potentially make it so we get those monies directly. We don't have to go through the IOT and kind of a reimbursement process to that. So obviously we're in support of that. It'd be more money, it'd be more flexible. We'll see what we get out of that. They also want to see increases to the Surface Transportation Block Grant. That's the main dollars we get for infrastructure out of that. That makes total sense. But then you'll see a few places where that 25% starts coming back in. So Highway Safety Improvement Program. This is money that typically goes to the DOT. It's technically eligible. Local communities are technically eligible for that, but it's not guaranteed. They want to make sure that it's guaranteed going forward. Same thing with bridge dollars. It's eligible, but it's not guaranteed. If it goes back to formula dollars, they risk you losing it. So they want to say if it goes to formula dollars, the formula says that 25% goes to the local communities. Unsure whether that means it comes through the MPO or if it just goes through the state. We don't know that yet, but this all seems like good stuff that we should all be supportive of. There's several other things here that I won't dwell on because they're kind of in the weed. But overall, obviously, this is a bill written by the Association of MPOs. It's very favorable to MPOs. We would support it. As things progress on, we'll keep you updated on this. Where we get to see this might be something we want to speak to a little bit in some of our meetings. But we'll keep you educated and updated on what that looks like. Any questions on any of that? Good there. So I can close out with director's report. Again, I'd like to touch on how we're doing with that strategic framework that Gunnar mentioned earlier. So I'll go through this fairly quickly. There's not a whole lot that's changed from last month to this month. Some of the upcoming things, I talked a lot about them here in this meeting, so office space lease, auditor selection, 20D updates. Those are all things you can see in the coming months on our agendas. To move on to regional planning and federal excellence. We talked about our roundtables and getting those a little more structured. So we have those underway now. That's been going pretty well. Plexa recently came and spoke just yesterday to the active transportation roundtable. I think that went okay. I'm not, I guess, but I think that went okay. Upcoming in the next several months before the end of the fiscal year, you'll probably see a public participation plan in front of you for approval, an active transportation plan, and some more work on a freight study. So I know we talked a lot today about some more administrative type things like lease and RPs and that sort of stuff, but you're going to see a lot of planning work coming at you in the next couple of months as well. Enhancing partnerships and services. Spoke about the Grimes line a little bit. The question whether that goes in this one or the next one too. Upcoming though, we've done a lot of work coordinating housing and transportation, working with the Housing Trust Fund. There's several events coming up that I want to draw your attention to. April 1st, we're having a workshop. It's going to be for community development directors, in particular, to talk about how to coordinate housing and transportation. April 30th, there's the housing symposium. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see a flyer for that. Charles Marone, who's someone the MPO has had come into town before, is going to be back speaking about some housing related matters, but it ties to infrastructure. He's an engineer by training. He does a lot of work there, so we're a sponsor of that event. And then the final thing that we're working on is May 29th, I think it was, it's going to be a bus tour. So it's going to be a highlight of some of DART's restructuring, but also pointing out some land uses around there, some of the other transportation investments that are going along those routes. So it's going to be a good opportunity to kind of get out into the community on a bus, see what's going on, both from housing, transportation, and all the coordination in between. Final thing, when it comes to the purpose-driven innovation or those wildly important projects, we did have a kickoff meeting for the alternatives corridor study for the 32455 late last month. That went really well, and there's continuing to be work on that. Water trails, I'm happy to announce that we have fully expended all of the federal grant for that program now. Doesn't mean it's done, but it's getting closer. There'll be some change orders coming your way over the next, probably in April, we'll have a couple change orders there. Harriet Street's one that we're really trying to get closed out. There's kind of one lingering issue that these change orders will help address, and that should be closed. And then the future phases, Birdland, Prospect Park, those are all moving forward as well. So we should be in a pretty good position to meet our grant obligations by the grant due date of next September. So I have
Questions, comments? Any other business to come before the committee or any other comments? Okay. If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
No, I should say something. Okay.
What?
Are you comfortable, Amanda?
Yeah.
Okay. If you haven't heard yet, we're losing, going to be losing Amanda from DART here pretty soon. And I know she's informed many folks, hopefully I won't advise anybody too much. But I just want to acknowledge all the work that Amanda's done to get DART where we're at today. And she's been a great colleague to me, and we met a lot and coordinated a lot of things. So greatly miss you, but wish you well going forward.
We around about 7 weeks, so you'll still see.
Done before you.
Yeah. Everything will be done.
All those in favor say aye.
Bye.
Opposed?
We're voting on a man. Right.
That's